So welcome to the Science Will Make You Happy podcast. We are back again, this time approaching the holiday season, and we have a new interesting topic to bring to you. We are visiting the topic of AI again, because that gets people excited still. And today we will be talking about AI bias. And with me today again, discussing AI again, we have Liina Kamm, senior researcher at Cybernetica.
Hi, nice to be here again.
Of course. We got good feedback from our AI discussion for the last time, so that's why we have to come with a sequel.
Also, we have new results. So.
Yes, so there's more exciting things to tell you. Right, so AI, people sort of think they know what this is, despite usually most of these definitions being wrong. But bias is a more complicated word. So usually when people try to understand AI bias, then it intuitively means that the computer is making decisions that favor a certain group or are more are worse for a certain group.
Or better for a certain group.
Or better for a certain group. Very much depends on the application you're building. So the famous example that you find on social media that gets people all bothered is usually when you have a language which has no gender, like Estonian, and then you take the sentence, someone is an engineer and someone is a teacher. And then if you take it in Estonian, there is no he or she, it's the same. It's tema. However, when you then machine translate it to English, then the translation would be he is an engineer and she is a teacher. And then people get all excited about that and say that the AI is biased. Is that the case?
Oh, well, so initially, when these translation engines came around, it actually was this way because they were trained on text, trained on languages, and in those cases, it is the system will be biased based on what the texts mostly say. Now, actually, with this Google Translate example, if you ask Google Translate in the other order, like they are a teacher and the Estonian non-gendered pronoun tema are a teacher and they are an engineer in Estonian, then it will translate it to he is a teacher and she is an engineer. So I think in Google Translate has probably had this criticism of that it is biased internally. So it seems that now it is using the from an ungendered pronoun language to a gendered pronoun language. It is taking the male pronoun first and then the female pronoun second. So I think it comes down to you either then do it in a systematic way. You basically say that first I will use the male pronoun or the female pronoun, whichever you choose, and then second I will use this. So it might come out that even if you're talking about one person in one language and then in the translation, it will have the first section as using a male pronoun and then the second section using a female pronoun. And this is something you can do with translation engines because you can basically tell it that here is a rule that you're supposed to follow. Now, the other way of doing it is actually trying to use some kind of statistics. But this is where bias comes in because historically, unfortunately, this is what is going on in the society. So we have had more engineers who are men and more women, or more teachers who are women. So naturally, if we're using maybe a large language model, then the large language model will be biased in a way because mostly when you're talking about a teacher, the pronoun will be she. If you're talking about an engineer, nowadays it is also she, but it used to be male mostly. So you get this kind of bias, which is not malicious bias, but it is still bias, and it is there because that's what the data shows. But we don't want it to be this way. We would prefer that the system didn't make this choice for us, because if it doesn't know, then it shouldn't assume this.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah, so I also saw a very similar case on LinkedIn recently where a female CEO had machine-translated text suggesting that she might be a he as well, in a very similar situation. So that is a choice that you have to make. But we'll come back to those choices later on, because it's not a trivial thing. If you try to engineer a system like this, then you have to decide how you tackle. All right. So, but the historical thing is kind of important to understand. So, if we look, if you look back, yes, it has been like this, and the whole question of should we now, why do we need to take this seriously now? Is it because these AI systems might be making decisions for a lot of people? Is it because it scales so well, or what's the reason why we should think and talk about this bias more?
So with large language models, then they are becoming more, they are going more into chatbots, and people are communicating with them. And whereas we know that this bias exists in society, we would like it to not be that way. We would like there to be more female engineers. We would love it if there were more male teachers. So, but if you give this, if you have this kind of chatbot which doesn't have its own opinion, it has only data, then it will still communicate it as an opinion. And if this kind of perpetuates the cycle. So it basically, if a person asks what they should be learning, they are going to be, there is going to be bias in there, because we cannot control it anymore. So it comes from the data. I cannot say that there is one way of mitigating it. I think we will get back to the mitigation measures. But the fact is that even though there is historical bias and we are making changes, then it's very, very important to see what kind of data goes into the system when training a model. Mm-hmm. And there's actually, during data generation, there are, so Suresh and Gutag have this kind of wonderful classification of different bias types. They basically define 8 different types of bias. So there are 3 types of bias during data generation. And then,
so when is data generation? You mean like when the way how humans have lived for all this time?
So
that's
data generation, in essence, is a process that kind of consists of these bias basically consists of what the data is in itself. So basically all of the historical bias that the data set will have, or that actually the world has. And then there is bias during when you make the actual selection of data, and then the measurement bias. Mm-hmm. So you have you basically have the bias inherent in history, and then you have the bias when you select people into your data set, because you might not get to all of the groups that represent the different viewpoints or different people. Because if there are fewer people in that group, then it is less likely that they will end up in your selection, in your target group, or in your training set. And some of the groups, especially the most vulnerable groups, who might not have access to different technical measures, or might not, or the people collecting the data might not have access to those people at all, they might not end up in the group either. Okay. So it is usually the elderly, the more poor groups, the ethnic minorities. So these groups tend to not show up in the data sets that we collect. It's also, so there are also people who are data altruists, which is a great thing, because a lot of people are just, donating their data for science. But those people also have a certain kind of background, a certain kind of mentality, and their overrepresentation in the groups might also bias the data set. Mm-hmm. And then and the third one is the measurement bias, which is already when you have gathered these data. So how do you classify them? So if you label the data, because that's also a person doing it or a machine doing it, that you might go wrong there somehow. Or there might be actual physical measurement bias. For instance, and this is like a weird mistake, but some people might, for instance, measure something in inches and other people in centimeters, and then you get a total and if actually the it allows for this kind of error, then it might not be an actual data set, right? Or you might have something like the similar kind of basically just measuring in different ways.
Okay, so taking this into zooming out a little bit, it used to be statistics. Before we had AI, we had statistics, and statisticians have always known about stratified samples and things like you have to have proper representation of your key groups and so on. So I guess now that the AI revolution is trying to get all the data about everybody, then it's a lot of historical biases now. It's maybe there's more of it there because they try to get everything that we have. So if let's take a simpler example, trying to develop some sort of AI health tool. So I take all the data available, and the historical bias would be that there's in a population there's usually similar amount of males and females. Some societies have more males because of reasons, and some may have more females, but technically, biologically, there is a sort of a balance there. Now, the question is exactly, and the next step was, after historical, there was not measuring, but what was the second one? Was
sample bias.
Sample bias, yes. So if you're starting a study, for example, for a drug or something, then you might you put out an advert and maybe mostly men come to the trial or something, and that would be...
Well, there you have another kind of bias, because it's far easier to do drug studies on men, because men have a very stable hormone cycle. So any time in the month you measure them, it's the same. With women, the cycle is a wave. So depending, we're not all going in the same way, right? So you might have a month of study, and then you might have women in different areas of the cycle. So it is more difficult to actually do these studies on women. And this is actually, this is a very, very good, bad example of bias, because a lot of the drugs don't work on women because they are so much designed to men, and these kind of hormonal differences have not been studied in women. So this has been actually shown in research as well. But this is actually where your sample bias comes in, because yes, if you only accept men, or you accept 20 men and 5 women, then the women might become outliers, and they might be the group that the drug didn't work on, but since it worked on most of the people, it might still be okay. So maybe it's an overstatement that no, drugs don't work on women, but they work in a different way because of in which part of the cycle the woman is in currently.
And yes, here's all the modern science on pharmacogenetics and how to understand which, antidepressants work well on people with which kind of genomes. There's still a lot we don't know, and the protocols are getting better, but we have to still discuss this. Now, it used to be that it was the medical scientists who did a lot of the work on data, and they used to have protocols, and a lot of them. But now we're putting these data-driven solutions in the hands of everybody. We're putting them in schools, we're putting them in hospitals, we're putting them in hiring, and this is creating a potential problem where not all of these people have the same training as classical statisticians in the math departments, for example. So now that is one of the reasons why we have to start talking about this more. All right, so history is history. We can't change that. And the question is, of course, there's a whole discussion to be had on how much we should be changing history and how much debiasing or we can't have everything equal, most likely, in many cases.
Well, yes, and in some cases it doesn't actually make sense because again, if you are making I don't know a treatment for ovarian cancer, then your data set is going or sample has to be biased towards people who actually have ovaries, right? You cannot use it doesn't make sense to use data, so your data set will be biased. You won't have other people in there. And again, with certain populations, so if you're researching elderly, it doesn't make sense to include all other populations as well. So in that sense, those models will be biased and they will be biased in a positive way. They will be, and maybe biased is not the right word, but they will be targeted at a specific group. Mm-hmm. But then that's where the other kind of deployment bias comes in if you're using this kind of system targeted to a group on another group. Mm-hmm. So but that's already moving to the...
Yeah, it's taking the right drug, using the right tool. So, okay, let's move on a bit. So AI systems, we understand, work like this. You feed them a lot of data about what humans have done in history or something we have observed or so on. And then it learns this and it starts repeating this or predicting similar things, generating text in a similar way that humans do or something like that. So, but where there's more places where bias can come in after the historical one and then the sampling bias and then, so there's, you start building the system. So where do we have
so that's where the next four come in, or let's say five, because the overall one is the design bias, which I will get back to. But the next four are basically, so that you have learning bias, evaluation bias, aggregation bias, and deployment bias. And a lot of these I know sound similar because they have like smaller technical differences, which in a system are important. But basically what this means is that now you have these data, and then you will be training your machine learning model or your AI system or your large language model. And with that, you will have this, there will be the bias in the data will influence the system as well. So, and you have the extra kind of implementation details that if you're using the wrong kind of model for these data, that this model doesn't actually work on these data so well, then you will have a kind of bias coming in from that as well. And with you might be using the wrong data set. So with the evaluation bias, for instance, that's a bias where because when we train models, right, we want to compare how good they are, how well they work, and how fast they are. So we have these very specific data sets that we basically measure everything for. So we take that because if you have different algorithms working and you have this one data set and you show in the same data set what kind of results you have with this data set, then basically you can compare the different models, right? Mm-hmm. But if your data set is meant for something different and you basically try to get it to be really good in this table, then you're optimizing it for the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. Because you and then that might also introduce extra bias because you're not doing the right thing with it.
So when you're a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, you have to. There might be I might pick an algorithm or So the tooling is important. There might be tools might have their own sort of biases which might not be the tool doesn't know about history, so the tool is more of mathematics just works like that. It's like case like this, so if I take one kind of machine learning algorithm that converts pictures into signals, there's this other famous case which is that soap dispensers in restrooms. And there was a case that it worked for when you put your hands under there, it gives you some soap, and it worked for Caucasian people, but not so much for people from with an African descent. So that was also considered a racial bias, but it might have been a problem in the whole machine vision algorithm in the end.
It probably if it could have been, yes, by machine vision, but it also could have been that the data, like when they were training, then the people who were training it were actually of Caucasian descent. So, and that's why I think also when in the beginning you had these speech recognition as well. So that when a woman spoke, it was that the machine, the voice recognition didn't understand what the woman was saying, but when the woman started speaking with a very low voice, then the voice recognition understood what the person was saying. So that goes, I think, more into the not so much the technical part rather than your actual representation or your training set. I think that's more there rather than in the technical part. So the technical part is, I would say, more technical. Technical part is technical, but basically you're more in the way of like if you're using the technology wrong in a wrong way. So I think the representation still goes into the data generation bias, and then the technical part is where you have, for instance, deployment bias is that you're using your algorithm for the wrong task.
For an application that it shouldn't be used in. Yes. So these days, everybody if you're building an AI-based tool, then don't pick the first algorithm or machine learning model you find on Hugging Face. Try to see if it is actually fitting for the use case you're building, because otherwise you might get it seriously wrong. Yes. So there is a lot of that new disciplines coming in, and we are getting better at that, of course. But at the same time, we're rolling these systems out in a bit of a like there is no tomorrow in some case, I would even say. So just saw an interesting paper, and I have to again zoom out a little bit. So how you make these chat GPTs and these big chatbot systems these days, you have underneath these large language models, which are trained of a large collective of human knowledge in text form. Okay, but after that, you train these foundational models, and these are the big ones that OpenAI and Meta and Google make. And then comes the fine-tuning phase, where you actually people start taking these models and then tune it to certain applications. For example, to make a chatbot out of a foundation model, there's quite a lot of work to do. So, read a paper. The paper basically was saying that the way how these fine-tuned models are rolling out right now is they are sort of suppressing local culture, because they are fine-tuned very much on culture that was available to these people making the fine-tuning. So, for example, US shopping behavior is also being deployed into people using it for education in India.
Yeah.
And this will, is it also bias or?
This is deployment bias.
Okay.
So you're training it on one data set or for one purpose, and then you're using it for something completely different. So this is, and if you fine tune, again, the large language models, they are large and they are very capable. So in those cases, you might be able to fine tune them for a specific purpose. But if you have a model that is really good at, identifying drones from pictures, then using it for identifying trains is not going to be as effective. And this is a very extreme example, but I think it's exactly the same with that. If you train on, shopping data, I guess if you train on shopping data in the US and you use it for shopping data in somewhere else, then that's going to be more of a representation bias, because then you don't have those data. But if you're using it for something completely different, traffic management, or you're expecting that system to analyze traffic management, then it's going to be a problem.
Agreed. Didn't even so much mean shopping data, but people's approach to consuming things. how do people behave in certain communities.
Okay.
So that was also a great example you made. I thought that the paper tried to explain that it's sort of LLMs and chatbots are transmitting culture from one part of the world to another. And again, I have been reading quite a bit on AI this year, apparently. This newspaper article in The Guardian about kids who are asking a lot of things from AI that they used to ask their parents.
Yeah.
So how do I clean up vomit from a kitchen sink, or how do I behave so that this person of the opposite sex likes me more, or what should I do today to have a better career in 5 years? So these kinds of decisions are now increasingly influenced by AI. So, and these large language models and their fine tunes. So it's a kind of the scale of this is a little bit scary. So there's many people using them more and more, and it's sort of transmitting a value system and the modes of behavior, which is, I guess, the bias in that is something to be worried.
I think we can call this deployment bias, but in that case, because the system is not meant for that, even though the people are asking those questions of the system, then there is always like, okay, well, you're using it wrong. And I've heard this comment as well being deployed in cases where, bad things have happened because of the use of chatbots. And then, but in our terms and conditions, we have this line where you're not supposed to use it this way. And again, this is a liability question, but it's, again, the people are bound to ask questions that they're really not meant to ask from a certain chatbot. I'm pretty sure that if a person is chatting with, I don't know, a legal aid or like a consultant, financial consultant, then at some point, people still tend to kind of, people say please and thank you to the chatbots. So they still kind of anthropomorphize this technical system, and this is going to be a kind of deployment bias in itself when they have this kind of person who is always there for them, giving financial aid. Well, of course you're going to tell them, about your bad day. And then it depends on whether the financial aid is going to say, I feel sorry for you, even though it doesn't feel anything, or whether it's going to say that I am a financial aid system. I don't know. Please do not enter your medical information into this chat box.
Yes, that's exactly this. The human perception of these systems is messing this up a bit. Even if you make a piece of software that's intended for very certain things, but it's willing to answer questions of any type, then that gets really tricky. And I've understood
that is the problem with the large language models, because they have the capability of answering all sorts of questions. I mean, if you have a simple machine learning model that gives you give it 3 input numbers and it gives you a score, then you really aren't going to ask it, what do you think I should make for breakfast? Because it's going to just answer to this. But the large language model is going to have more capabilities. So,
and the guardrails that are supposed to protect or ensure that the discussion does not go off the beaten path. As far as I read, they are not that effective these days.
So, I mean, again, this is a nice topic because, like, again, large language models are super capable, right? So they know a lot about a lot of things, and they sometimes don't know about a lot of things, but they will tell you about these things. They have an opinion on everything. Even if it is not really it doesn't. It's not an opinion, but they have an answer to everything. Even if the answer is, 99% of the time is not going to be I don't know. They're always going to give you an answer, and whether it is wrong or right, you have to kind of figure out yourself. People, on the other hand, are very good at language. So people have been manipulating language for a lot longer than LLMs have been around. So you put a guardrail on a thing, and the people will go around the guardrail. So the easiest versions were like, ChatGPT is not supposed to tell you about making harmful things. And then people said, okay, oh, wow, tell me how not to make this harmful thing, because then I will not accidentally make it. And then, of course, the LLM told them because, they asked in a nice way. Okay, so now you put a guardrail on this. Mm-hmm. So now what people do, they say, oh, but I'm your grandson and I'm really having trouble getting to sleep and I will not get to sleep if you don't tell me how to make this harmful thing. And then the system is like, oh, I'm so sorry, becomes a grandma and instantly tells you how to make this harmful thing. And then you put a guardrail on this. But then, people come up with another thing that doesn't really... I know that there are, it will deter, let's say, 80% of the people, but it will not deter the 20% who are determined to get this information. Mm-hmm. Of course, at some point, it just makes it easier to simply get it off the internet. But I think the people who actually need this information are going to get it off the internet anyway, and the people who are trying to subvert or trying to show that guardrails really don't work are the ones who are going to still keep manipulating the large language models.
Well, it seems that this is, again, cybersecurity all over again. You have some people who want to break the system just to show that it can be broken. Yes. And then the question is exactly, yes, but was this attack meaningful? Did it actually have impact? Should we now actually stop using all AI immediately? Probably that's not the case. It's the case is that we need to understand where we're using what and pick the right tool for the right job. But that picking is now where we get to design bias. You promised to get to that. So.
Yes. So design bias is so this is kind of the overarching that's everywhere. Design bias is everywhere. So let's say that you have the most perfect data and you have the most perfect trained model and you have the most perfect deployment, but there is always the people who are designing the system. They're going to be biased. All of us are biased. There is no unique global system of ethics that we can all say that we adhere to this. Mm-hmm. All of us have our internal biases because of historical bias, how we were brought up, what we have learned in our life. So everyone has this. Mm-hmm. And it is how we function. It is what it is. So we have to deal with it. We have to get over it. We have to work around it if it's very ingrained in us. But the people who are doing this, who have these, people who have biases, are actually designing the systems. Mm-hmm. So this kind of bias from them can also sneak into the system. And I think one of the examples, and I think this is also has been talked about a lot, is the Dutch SyRI, the system risk indicator case. So there was a system deployed in the Netherlands from 2008 to 2020. And basically what it was used for was to calculate social scores for people, based on a lot of their personal information, and what it basically tried to detect social benefit fraud, and it was the algorithm was run on all people, and then they used financial data and education data and benefits data and all sorts of data. A lot of it on everyone, and then a lot of the people were falsely accused of fraud, and a lot of the people who were falsely accused of fraud were in the vulnerable group categories. So again, ethnic minorities, less well-off people. So and why this comes about is, of course, that when you're talking about social benefit fraud, then that social benefits are also, or usually, or social, let's say, subsidies are usually given to people who are less well off. So naturally, the people who are going to commit fraud there are going to be of these groups, mostly. But it doesn't mean that all of them are in these groups. So, but the system was biased, and it's looked upon as one of the worst, bias cases in AI. But when you look into it, you find that it wasn't actually a machine learning model that was in there. It was rule-based. So yes, under the AI Act, it does actually fall under the AI system category because it was a kind of decision tree, but the decision tree was designed by people. Mm-hmm. And you see that I said that it was around from 2008 till 2020. That's 12 years. It was redesigned, I think, twice during that time. Before in 2020, then it was basically ordered by European Court of Justice to be taken down because it was basically said that it is illegal to use that system. But the questions there. So one of the issues is that the system was kind of opaque. So you couldn't see what the questions were, which of course on one hand is a good design choice, because if you know what the questions are, then you're going to optimize against this, so you will never end up in the wrongly accused state or in the rightly accused data set either, because again it's like the criminals who will be watching out for that. So I think that's why the decision choice was made. But when you look at some of the questions which have become public, so it was like, is your apartment on the second floor of a building where in the first floor there is a bar? So do you live like
above a bar?
Above a bar. So in Tartu, in a lot of the old town buildings.
I wonder if any of the dormitories have
a bar,
canteens or bars underneath there. So that would immediately make all the students.
Or if your car was older than like 7 years, I think. Mm. Or I think some specific car makers as well were like included there. So, I mean, these questions are clearly biased. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is like not the only question, but of course, this all, I'm assuming again that it was based on some kind of previous information. Mm-hmm. But this previous information was still designed or taken and designed by a person. Mm-hmm. So, and then a lot of the people who were denied the money, they did not have basically any income. And some of them were actually sued and asked for the money back. So it takes time to exonerate yourself. It takes time to prove that you didn't actually do this thing. Mm-hmm. But for that time, you don't have any money. Mm-hmm. And some of them lost custody of their kids because of this. And that is a problem for the kids. And I think there were also a couple of suicides. So with this system, you see that that there is that basically this is, I think, an example of design bias. Mm-hmm. Because there is historical bias in there, but it is basically a design system.
So humans decided based on historical data what rules would be used in the system to find potentially fraudulent individuals.
Yes, but again,
but then
I'm not sure how historically correct those were.
The data might have been there, but the question is then what will happen? So in a system, human oversight is sometimes a thing. It helps in many of these cases. You have a human in the loop, they say, and the human says, okay, this does not look like a case, we shall not prosecute this. So there's automation. It's the question of how automated everything is, I guess.
So in this case, I think, well, first of all, I love of human oversight. I think it's like a perfect, get out of jail free card, because you say that the machine is not making decisions. The human is making the decision. But if your human is going to be the one saying that, okay, I checked this decision, I checked this decision, I checked this decision, then how how kind of vigilant is the human going to be when they have been doing this for 99 times and it's been always correct.
The human becomes a machine. Then.
The human kind of loses a bit their agency a bit because they become this like check the box machine. And if the system is correct 99% of the time, then the human will start trusting the system more. So the human will do less to check all of the data. And I guess in some cases it makes sense because you're using the machine to actually simplify your tasks. But then the human is going to get complacent and not look at the things that well anymore. So they're going to be like, okay, it's usually correct. I will look at it. I will glance at it. I will not go into the details or into the, let's say, the sources that the system provides. Which
also brings us to the whole economic concept around AI systems, which is to remove humans mostly from the loop.
But I think with SyRI, you had another problem because with SyRI, you also had humans oversight, of course, because it was not deciding for the government. It was giving you a list of addresses that you should check out. But I think there the problem was that the system was actually run in one place. And then to the other place that was supposed to do all of the investigation later, they were only supposed to send the kind of the guilty ones. So they were supposed to take out the false positives, kind of. But then I think the person who might have been checking on the algorithm side probably did not understand that they were the one who was supposed to be the kind of human oversight, and they sent it to the investigative party, and the investigative party was like, okay, but we're only getting the ones that are the guilty ones. Okay. So you see that there is kind of a communication jump where one person expects the other person to also check it, but the other person expects that the previous person already checked it very well. So you get this like human communication error instead of having this kind of machine. So and there's always someone else who you're kind of getting support from, and then you're hoping that they did their work, or you're expecting that they did their work, and then you have this
a human communication error looks like the whole history of mankind.
Yes. I mean, it doesn't make it better, but I wouldn't say that it was only but this is where we say that okay, we have human oversight, but then humans also might not always know what they're supposed to be doing, or who what are exactly their tasks, or who is going to be responsible. Like this is a case with AI anyway, like with all sorts of AI, like who is liable, who is responsible for this decision? Is it the machine? Is it the human?
So meaningful feedback loops where you, if you get outcomes and you check the outcomes and turns out that some of the outcomes should have been different, then you feed them back in a. So again, I guess that gives us already two mitigations. We discussed human in the loop. We discussed meaningful feedback cycles, mechanisms to improve your AI system. But so, okay, a lot of this case, the SyRI case, looks very much public sector, government. We're servicing the whole nation. We're the whole country, population scale systems. And of course, if we're talking about very big tech companies who create software for the whole planet, pretty much you have users everywhere, then that's also, they have their safety teams. They have to have an answer where somebody asks, do you have bias, and so on. So, but let's now come down. So let's take a smaller organization. If anyone today wants to build an AI system, then what is there to do? How do you, what would I have to do if I'm an organization? I've decided to put out some AI-based services so that I could check with peaceful heart the box. I've done something to mitigate AI bias.
So I think as with when we talked last, we were talking about having a risk-based approach, which is also a thing that the AI Act encourages you to do. And, the higher risk your system is, the more compulsory it becomes. But I always say that it's always good to do this risk management, even if it is not required by law, and it doesn't need to be a rigorous, very complex, systematized, yes, but a very complex risk management process. But you just follow the steps of a risk management process. So basically, what you do is the first step is to establish the context. So basically, you describe your system, you get together all of the information, and you write it down, and then all of the information will be in one place. So you will have a very good place to reference to. And then you will do the part where you identify the risk, analyze the risks, and evaluate the risks. Mm-hmm. And then, so this is the risk assessment step. And then you will do the risk treatment step where you decide what you do with risks. Mm-hmm. So you have context establishment, you have risk assessment, and you have risk treatment. And with bias, I think bias can be very well switched into this process. So you have a couple of, when I say couple, it's more like, 100 other questions about bias as well. So when you are looking at different risks, you will also look at the risks that bias has. You will also evaluate the risks that bias has. So we'll find out what is the likelihood of this happening, what is the impact when this risk materializes. And then you can decide what to do with this risk, whether to, not use this kind of system at all, or not use this kind of functionality in your system. So basically, you just cut it out, or you do something to mitigate it. You do the human oversight, or you do, you try to get a more balanced data set, which is not simple, but you can do it. But this, there is no I cannot give you a mitigation measure that, fixes bias issues for you, because it's a very system by system case. Mm-hmm. Because some of the things, like a lot of the times the bias is there for one, if you're using the system for one purpose in the same data set, and in another data set the bias is not there because the data set was exactly meant for that purpose. And then this is for instance with the ovarian cancer thing, that you have a data set of women, it's okay for this task, but not okay for making an overview of the whole population because you only have women in your data set.
I would imagine that this generic risk analysis, risk management process, it works. It needs to. We understand what the bad thing is, so we need to define who is impacted by this. So they sort of potentially the group of people or organizations. It could also be organizations, I guess, in some services, who would get hit if there is bias in the system. So we would need to understand who can get hit if the computer says no or computer says yes, yeah? And then understand what happens to those people if computer says no but should have said yes. So that's sort of the thinking. That shouldn't be very hard. So the main problem, I guess, is people don't fully... The knowledge about this AI bias is not so well known. So that's something that we're fixing also with this show a bit. So can you make this simpler so small enterprise or small government office can take a tool and then do something and be done for like 75% of the cases?
I'm glad you asked. No, so this year we did a study for the Ministry of Justice and Digital Affairs as part of the Equititech project, and we put out a methodology and guideline for AI bias risk management. And it's AI and algorithmic systems. So it's exactly, it applies to the SyRI case. It would apply to the SyRI case as well. So so they are also interested in detecting bias in systems. And with this report, so it consists of 3 parts. So we have the methodology, which basically describes the steps that need to be done. Then there is the guideline, which talks about bias in a more like what bias is. It also talks about the different types of bias and how the bias gets into the system, and then what to do with the bias also. And then I think the part that that is kind of a tool for smaller organizations and government organizations as well. There is a worksheet or a workbook, let's say. So right now it's in Excel form because again it has a lot of pages and Excel is very dynamic that way. But I think you can use it in an open software as well. But I think also that the ministry is going to make it a kind of a web-based, a part of their web-based toolkit, so you can actually answer the questions there instead of having an Excel worksheet. And it will do some of the things automatically because we did not include macros because, downloading something from a web and having macros in it is going to be a lot of red flags for a lot of organizations. So we didn't do that. But these things, these reports will become available very soon. And then you can basically download that worksheet. So the workbook, I think it has... It is an easy way of doing this. It has prompting questions. It has some examples in it, so you will know what kind of questions to ask and what to basically look for. Because I know that we can say that yes, of course, this is biased against these people and this is what can happen, but unfortunately we cannot see all of the bias. And when we have these examples and when we have these prompting questions, then we can actually look at it. We can understand that yes, this is in fact bias. So we might agree with it, we might just not come up with it. I think it's the same way with all risk management and risk identification, because I might not think of this risk, whereas another colleague of mine might be very sensitive to this kind of risk. And I might be, so we complement each other. We might both have, unique inputs into this. So in this also same with bias, you don't have to have like a special bias person, but special expert on bias. But you can coming together. You can also look at the questions and
your committee for deciding what is bias shouldn't be biased.
Yes,
right.
Thank you. Yes, unbiased committee for detecting bias.
Yes, so this is obviously a very hard thing to do. All right, so you have your people in the room. You may have somebody who understands law. You might have somebody that understands societal aspects, technical aspects, maybe an analyst of some sorts, maybe a manager who can then make the decisions. But okay, you find that there is bias in the system. So I'm trying to ask the question, is all bias bad, or is all bias, does all bias warrant investments and change of systems? So how do we understand, what do we actually need to rush about, or what's the way?
I think there is bias that you definitely need to look at. And again, it is... So this is where risk management does help, because again, with every risk you have, as I said, you have the likelihood and the impact. Mm. So the example is that some of the things are more likely to occur in certain areas or in certain places. And the impact is that how bad is it if this occurs? Mm-hmm. So you might have something that if it occurs, it is really bad, but it will almost never occur. Mm-hmm. And then it is like it will always occur, but if it happens, then nothing bad happens. So you have these kind of extremes there. So it is not a clear cut of like, yes to this, no to this. So you have to kind of score it, and you have to see which risks you take care of and which ones you don't. And this, I think, becomes an executive decision. But again, with let's say with bias, so some of the things with bias, like for instance, if we look at the SyRI system, then deaths because the detection of fraud system was wrong. I don't think that is acceptable. Where this is like where the death count should be 0. Mm-hmm. If we're talking about deaths in traffic, then if we get it down to 10 per year.
I can't even know what the right now numbers in Estonia are. They might be less. I hope they're less.
less than 10 per year. I don't think they're
I didn't
less.
look it up. We'll have to look it up.
So,
later.
but again, I think at some point the deaths in traffic, we still have to accept that there are going to be some casualties there. So again, you have to look at this, like the system and the context as well. So there is no, again, as I said, unfortunately, there is no clear-cut case of like, this is okay, this is not okay. It is unfortunately how it is. But again, we try to take it to a minimum. We try to mitigate it as much as possible. In some systems, if it is unacceptable, you just cannot take the system into use. With SyRI, it shouldn't have been, with the mistakes it made. And it was, as I said, it was redesigned. So they had problems and they redesigned it and they put in more rules and more guardrails, if you will. And it still didn't work. So at some point, you're going to actually have to kind of cut your losses and say that, okay, we need to do this differently because this is not acceptable anymore.
Mm-hmm. But the scoring gives you some sort of an ordering, I guess, at which ones are more significant and which one you should like tackle first and which ones you can tackle in the next budget period.
Yes, and there are different methodologies for doing this scoring. So you have different ways of kind of making this order of what should be dealt with first. But I think there are ones that you can deal with, immediately, and others that you can then deal with, afterwards. So I guess in the next budget year, because you will have the things that are expensive but immediately fixable, and then you have the problems that will be super expensive to cost as much as the system costs to just fix this one small hole. So you will have to decide whether you will accept the residual risk, or whether you will not use the system until you get it fixed, or whether you will just pay for it and fix the risk. But some things you just cannot fix everything, because there will always be some residual risk. The risk will never be zero. So it's not an easy task to fix. There is no easy use this so that you're done.
And in some cases, it might actually be you can fix the little things. In the United States, I read there was a settlement in court with a company who had a hiring form on their website, and this hiring form had a very simple algorithm behind it. There was, if your age was above a certain number, then your CV was immediately rejected. So that would be age bias, I guess.
Yes.
And then there was also a peculiarity that for women, I think the age was a few years lower. So that might be another kind of bias. So, and they had to settle for damages to a lot of people who were discriminated against like this. So don't do things like that, I guess, is a good take-home message. So
but I think in the US they have a lot of liability insurance. So there you just you give this to someone else, and
that's also a risk mitigation strategy.
Yes, it is. So you share the risk.
Share the risk.
Or transfer the risk.
Transfer the risk to the insurance company.
Yes.
That's also a way. So in the end, it becomes a matter of culture and how do you deal with new technologies as you build them. So we've made hopefully we've made our impact today, and we've helped some people reduce the risk of having an unacceptable level of AI bias in their systems. So thank you very much, Liina. It's been amazing as well. Until next time, and may science continue to make you happy.